Hey to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession. This week's episode is brought to you by Imaging Services, ChiroThin, Chiro Moguls, Mahalo Wellness, McCaffrey's Clinical Mentoring, Local Gold, Chiro Health USA, The Goodman Factor, Chiropractic Rocks, Winner's Edge, Accident Records, Chiro Tax Pro, Full Script, your online dispensary, Angela Pearson, author of I'm Not Contagious, and Digital Hustle. Let's hustle.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 165 of the Chiro Hustle podcast. I'm your co-host, Luke Millette, and here's your host, Jim Chester.
So today we have the opportunity of interviewing Don Rasmussen, and his business is called Chiro Tax Pro. So if you want to learn how to pay yourself first and have him teach you how to pay yourself second, stay tuned. So we are on episode 165 of the Chiro Hustle podcast. Today we have Don Rasmussen, and you are with Chiro Tax Pro. And this is a real landmark opportunity for us to have a podcast with one of our sponsors and to talk to you about all things to benefit the chiropractic world in a financial status. And I think that a lot of times, as I've been getting the drift from the profession, is some people right now are just a little confused and what to do financially and how to actually make sense of our current situation that we're in right now. But I wanted to thank you for being our guest today, Don.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Yeah, and we're going to talk all things finances today, which I'm kind of excited about because I'm sure our listeners probably have a lot of these questions that they want to know. So what is your involvement in the chiropractic world, and what made you choose to go in that direction to help chiropractors?
Yeah, great question. So I've actually been in the industry for over 30 years. And about 7 or 8 years ago, went to see my chiropractor, my DC, to get an adjustment. And this is back when Mr. Obama was president. And my DC said, listen, Don, I know you work in the tax planning area. I am getting killed in taxes. Is there anything you can do for me? And so I said, well, let me take a look at your tax returns. And I looked at them and ended up finding him over $100,000 in tax savings. So we had a great conversation. I'm a big believer in chiropractic. I go to matter of fact, I have an appointment next week for my adjustment. And he said, you know what? There are a lot of chiropractors out there that do need help. They're great at what they do. But when it comes to taxes, it's not necessarily, or even business in general, is not one of their strong suits. And so I made a decision at that time for us to focus specifically with chiropractors. And quite frankly, we love it. We love I actually have chiropractors who work in our practice now. I have a son of a chiropractor who works in our office. So we really believe wholeheartedly. And so, DCs and chiropractors believe in pain management. And I always like to use this parallel. We do too. It's just a different type of pain. It's called taxes. And so we focus specifically on the tax planning and tax credits. And as I mentioned to you guys earlier, with this whole coronavirus situation and how it's devastated the chiropractors around the country, we realized that it was going to be imperative for us to help come alongside them, not to be the hero, but come alongside them as a guide through this process because they're just trying to stay afloat and keep their practices uprighted. So we put a lot of emphasis over the last 60 days, specifically into this SBA, PPP, and EIDL, and all these different acronyms that they bring out of Washington. We've been coming alongside the chiropractors around the country. So that's kind of how we got involved, and that's how we've been, up to this point, been very involved, even with a lot more chiropractors around the country.
Yeah, that makes me interested too, because I'm sure there's probably some questions out there that people are like, well, this guy says he can help with taxes, but how does it look like when you onboard somebody and you work with them and they want to apply for this PPP and the SBA stuff and they want to figure these things out? Like, how does that look to start working with you guys?
Yeah, great question. So, the way we've designed it, we actually tripled our staff to accommodate. We've had hundreds of chiropractors around the country who've requested assistance in this process. So, if someone's already applied for the PPP, they've gone through their bank. Of course, our biggest value, because again, we can give them some guidance, connect them with some lenders. but ultimately our greatest value is helping them maximize their forgiveness. And matter of fact, there's just some new rules and guidelines that just came out less than a week ago from the Treasury Department that, matter of fact, I did a recording yesterday with Chiro Health about this, and that is how to maximize the forgiveness and some of the new definitions and clarity that we've been waiting on. So, that's number one. Number two, on the EIDL, first of all, there's been the first batch or tranche, as we refer to it, that came out, and then they came out with the second tranche of funding for the grants as well as the loans. Unfortunately, right now they've been focusing specifically on the agricultural businesses out there, but we've been hearing from the SBA that once they complete those applications, they're going to be able to continue to process those who applied for EIDL after the fact. But also, we work very closely with Marco Rubio's office, and he has let us know a couple things that's important. Number one, they're looking at creating more funding for both the PPP and the EIDL. That's number one. Number two is that the grants, and then they're also looking at extending that 8-week window, which has been, I just got off a phone with one of the DCs up in Pennsylvania, very, very concerned about being able to hit that 8-week mark just because they couldn't bring all their staff back. And I said, there's some good news. They're looking at extending that out. We're somewhere around 12 weeks is what they're planning. So probably in the next couple of weeks, we're going to get some good news to help, the chiropractors make sure they hit those numbers. So, but anyway, so where it comes to that point, we actually have set up a specific website for those who need help in either one of those areas, whether it's forgiveness or for their to get applied for, whether that's the PPP or the EIDL as well.
So just in case someone out there doesn't know yet, can you describe just a little bit what the PPP program is and why is it crucial for chiropractors to get on that?
Yeah, great question. So the Paycheck Protection Program was designed back here on March 27th. It was signed into law, and that was going to allow business owners and chiropractors specifically, as we're talking about today, to be able to request up to 2.5 times their average monthly payroll. And so what they're really trying to do is help, again, upright the ships of these chiropractors and business owners around the country and making sure they have enough money to either bring people back to work or keep them on the payrolls. And I'll tell you, I've heard some very heart-wrenching stories with chiropractors around the country. I know of one comes to mind up in New Jersey where, ultimately, they had to shut down because he actually came down with the coronavirus himself, had to put himself in a hotel to be away from his family, and told me specifically that he came to death's door twice during that unfortunate time. But because he's not able to work, of course, the staff's not going to be able to work. And so that impacts not just him and his employees, but his family as well. So again, a lot of DCs out there really do need that funding to be able to keep their doors open. I think of another chiropractor, actually I developed a really good friendship with him. He was taken out of his other resources just to keep his staff on, but he knew he couldn't do that indefinitely because they weren't seeing the patients that they were seeing before. So there's a lot of different dynamics that come in to place there, Luke, when it comes to, there's so many different types of chiropractors out there. There's some who have actually been able to be proactive and help keep some of their head count up. I've seen some drop as little as 10%, and I've seen some drop as much as 80 or 90%. So again, that PPP money has been kind of a life preserver, if you want to call it, for a lot of businesses. Unfortunately, there's some that didn't. Matter of fact, we just got a request today from a referral that said, listen, I haven't even applied for the PPP money yet. Well, the good news is there's still money out there under the second tranche. But unfortunately, the lenders are going to be less because some of them have maxed out to what they can provide and offer out to business owners. So we have some good contacts that can look out and see what lenders still have money. And then you just have to go through that process. And generally, I've seen it as quick as 3 days, and I've seen it as long as 3 weeks. So
that's really good information. I think there's a lot of people that are going to be watching this and they're going to be reaching out to you because even for us personally, like that's of interest to me because I've tried to get through to banks. We've emailed them, we've called them, we've tried to set appointments with them. And, even today, a friend of mine was driving through the damn bank and like, seriously, and she was in the line for 20 minutes outside the bank. So you having connections of people that can actually get people processed is a huge asset.
Yeah, and what we're finding are these fintech companies are actually very, very beneficial, like Cabbage and Lendio and Blue Vine, because, like you said, your typical lenders, they're not even allowing people to come into their buildings or being able to talk to somebody. I actually have banked with Wells Fargo, and for the longest time they weren't taking any applications, and they said we're taking applications. Now they're not taking applications. They said that you can't, the phone calls and the emails are slow to be responded to because they had to cut back on their staff because of this coronavirus as well. So it has been a real trickle down effect, not just, and again, in the chiropractic, but into the banking and other industries as well. But yeah, so there's definitely still money out there. We get a report generally on, if not every day, every other day from SBA, letting us know how much of the funds are still left. And of course, lenders who are still in the queue to be able to lend money.
So this isn't a scripted question with you or anything, but like, how have you gone about building your business with chiropractors up to this point?
Yeah, great question. So the biggest way that we have been able to grow our practice is prior to the coronavirus. So let's kind of put it in two phases. Is just being involved. We're very involved in many state associations, and and of course are planning on getting into more. We've gone to a few more states this year here, or our plans were. Quite frankly, it's all been adjusted because of this coronavirus. So that was what we've been doing historically. Of course, we've done a lot of webinars. This year here has been very interesting, but Chiro Health, we've been involved with them, with Ray and Christy and the team over there doing webinars, getting it out, the information out. State associations, we've done it for California and Washington and Iowa and various ones, Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia. And so our goal, of course, is not just to be a service provider. We're wanting to come along, like I said, as a guide, whether that's the SBA situation or taxes or tax credits. One time in the future, maybe we can do just a session on tax credits. We have research and development credits. We have a tax attorney and CPAs on our team that are specialists in this area, finding research and development credits for chiropractors. And so most of them, when I have this conversation at a state association or a coaching group we'll go to, that we find that they don't think that they're eligible. And the reality is the team that we have actually set up the research and development department for PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is one of the largest CPA firms in the country. So, and they're very conservative, and we've never had an audit, and they've done over 5,000 of these here. So they're very good at what they do. But the point is, when we have these conversations with chiropractors, they just don't realize that they're eligible for that. So the second part of that would be this whole coronavirus. So as soon as this happened, Ray and I were talking from Chiro Health, and he and I started talking. We need to get this information out because there's a lot of DCs that are hurting. So we went ahead and put together a program to, first of all, let them know that, listen, here's how you can do it yourself. We walked them step by step. Okay, you can go to the bank, you can apply for your PPP, you can go to the SBA website and apply for the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And so we told them exactly how you do it. And we just said, listen, if you can't do it or don't want to do it, we have a team here. We've tripled our staff to accommodate the need. And so we set up a specific website. And then we had about 580 chiropractors from around the country respond to us. So of course, it was a lot coming in. And, that was a tremendous, I will say, unexpected request as far as the amount is concerned. So we had little, growing pains, but we've got it managed. And now we're really focusing specifically on getting it forgiven. So those who did get it, whether that we assisted them or they did it on their own, now it's about making sure they don't have to pay it back. Because there's a saying that I use everywhere I go. And I talk specifically about taxes, and that is, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. So when it comes to this whole PPP money, it's not about how much you receive, it's how much you get to keep and not have to pay back. And so that's really our focus now is really, as a matter of fact, I've probably in the last week, I've probably done 100 coaching sessions with our clients, just walking them through that process. And we have client relationship managers who will take them through the journey as well. So that's really how we've built our practices, because we in the past help with the tax planning, tax credits, and then of course now with the SBA stuff.
So that kind of leads to the next question. This Paycheck protection program sounds really great on paper, but are there any like tripwires, or are there any like fine print details chiropractors should be wary about?
Yeah, great question, Luke. It's interesting. Probably about 2 weeks ago, I received an email from one of our clients up in Virginia. And this is a DC who has a very thriving practice and has had one for many years. And he sent me an email that he was told that, if you did not have a need for these monies, that you could actually be fined as well as prosecuted criminally. And we all heard about the Shake Shacks, and Harvard and Yale and these different ones who went out and got these PPP loan monies and were told you better return them back or we're going to press charges. And so I've had a lot of conversations about, well, because I've taken this money and maybe I had some money saved up over the side, are they going to come after me? Well, the good news is the Treasury Department, well, let me back up. There was actually some banks sending out letters to their clients or their customers saying, keep in mind that you may want to return this money because you could be prosecuted if you have other assets. So the Treasury Department came back and made it real clear. Listen, if your PPP loan is less than $2 million, then you don't have to worry about it. We're going to assume that you had an economic need there. So that took a lot, because I don't, quite frankly, I can't tell you of any chiropractors that I have specifically that got a $2 million PPP loan. But that put a lot of minds at ease. And the second thing is, it's all about, again, the forgiveness. So let's assume they do not extend this out to the 10 or 12 week period, but they keep it at the 8. The only greatest risk that you have is not doing it properly, not making sure that they're authorized, whether that's payroll or non-payroll expenses, is making sure it's done properly from a compliance standpoint, because what is not forgiven is going to go into a loan. Now, the loan is not a bad loan, meaning that unfortunately you have to pay it back. But number two is it's only 1% is the interest rate, and you have a 6-month deferral. So it's not. It could be a lot worse. It could be a 10% loan, but they've tried to make it as comfortable for those who do it wrong, I guess is the best way to put it, so that it doesn't become a financial burden in the future.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because there's a lot of snags when people are out there looking for assistance and they want to have support. And, one of the lines I always use is the reason most people don't go to a chiropractor is because they don't know where to go or who to trust.
Sure.
And a lot of times people fall into financial illiteracy because they don't know who to be following and have as their charismatic leader. So I think a lot of times the chiropractor needs to know how to serve their people, but they need to know how to serve their business too. And I think that a lot of times people put so much interest into technique with chiropractic. They put so much interest into getting new patients in chiropractic that they don't really dive deep into understanding financial literacy and how to manage a business properly and do the tax things and apply for certain aspects of financial support. And maybe there's things that you can help them with that they didn't know where to go or who to trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jen, that's a great point. Of course, we work with hundreds of chiropractors around the country. What we find is they're extremely good at what they do. They love what they do. It's interesting. I'll ask them, okay, why did you become a DC? And just the whole variety of stories, anywhere from, when I was a kid and I played football and got hurt, or it could be a whole variety of different reasons, but they love what they do and they love their patients. And so, the big thing, what I find though, is whether they go to Life University or Palmer or wherever, is they don't get a lot of financial guidance. And so what happens a lot of times, they come out of school, they may be carrying $250,000 of debt, and then they buy a practice or they start a practice and they buy equipment and they rent, get a lease and all these type of things, which all business owners do. But like you said earlier, then they start focusing specifically on doing pain management for their patients. And really, on the business side, they're just not one of their strong suits. And I can tell you, I've seen the whole gamut. I've had some that, I think of one who has a wife who's very, very good at what she does as far as managing the finances. And then I have those, which I say generally on the other side, who don't do much at all. Matter of fact, I had a DC who's in his 50s who made a comment to me. He said, I've never even looked at a profit and loss statement. And so that's a little surprising for me, because that's kind of the pulse of your business, is knowing whether you're profitable or you're not. And so it was just very, very intriguing to hear that comment. So, but yeah, they really do need, again, we're not here to come and take control of your financial life as much as it's say, okay, keep more of what you make, and less in taxes. Our tax rates are historically low right now. And so the good news is that there's opportunities to do some tax planning for today and keep more money in your pocket. But even like with this PPP money, first of all, that money is tax-free, which is a tremendous blessing to our chiropractors out there. Now, the IRS right now specifically has stated that you cannot use those expenses, be it payroll or rent or utilities, as a deduction at the end of the year. But I will tell you, Congress is pushing very, very hard, and I expect the IRS will probably buckle under the pressure, and that is to allow you to be able to deduct that. So that creates some tax planning opportunities later on in the year that they didn't have in the beginning of this year before the crisis. So those are the type of things we look at as how to optimize and take advantage of what the law allows you to do. And again, staying within the guidelines. Oh, one other thing too, I want to mention, both you, Jim and Luke, is, what we always tell our clients is we're not here to replace your CPA. We've actually had CPAs refer clients to us. Some here in North Carolina, some out on the West Coast, who said, listen, I don't have time to do what you guys do. We have 5 CPAs on our team, and accountants and tax coaches and a tax attorney. But they said, we don't have time to do what y'all do. So they refer clients over to us. And some of them, of course, are not chiropractors. But our goal, of course, is not to replace the CPA. It's just to come alongside and do the more proactive planning. And what we're finding is interesting. I was talking to a gentleman down in Houston yesterday, and he said his banker recommended him to us. He had heard our webinar and said, listen, you need to reach out to these guys and they can give you some guidance. So, that's our goal, is just try to help them as much as possible. And whether that's through this crisis now or just going on through normalcy as we get back to it later on this year.
You made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession. This week's episode is brought to you by Imaging Services, Chirothin, Chiro Moguls, Mahalo Wellness, McCaffrey's Clinical Mentoring, Local Gold, Chiro Health USA, The Goodman Factor, Chiropractic Rocks, Winner's Edge, Accident Records, Chiro Tax Pro, Full Script, your online dispensary, Angela Pearson, author of I'm Not Contagious, and Digital Hustle. Let's hustle.
Well, I know one of the tracks that you probably have realized in chiropractic is a lot of chiropractors don't just have a one staff business. They're not just sitting there, answering phones and adjusting and scheduling people and collecting money. They actually have people helping them. They have I call them chiropractic angels, chiropractic assistants, but we call them CAs as an acronym. The world is full of acronyms. But when we think about these chiropractic angels flying back to work and coming back to serve their patient base with the doctors, what does that look like if the doc is really struggling and these assistants aren't able to come back to work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of different reasons why they can't come back. So maybe they are really scared about being exposed to it. That could be one option. The other option is that, our government has been very gracious under the unemployment laws, and they've given an extra $600 a week. So that's kind of incentivized them not to come back to work. Or thirdly, because the state doesn't allow it. I know specifically, I'm thinking of licensed massage therapists, LMTs. We get a lot of DCs who are told they can't bring their LMTs back to work yet. And so, there's a lot of people who are dependent upon what the DC is going to do. And going out and getting this PPP money, of course, helps to give them some reassurance that they still have a job. Unfortunately, right at the beginning of this whole crisis, we had a doctor out in Oregon who specifically told one of our owners here that he said, or what she told him was that, I'm just going to close, I'm laying everybody off. I'm not going to continue operating a practice. I'll just go work for somebody else. So unfortunately, in their case, it became too stressful as being responsible for those CAs and those LMTs. And so, like you said, the CAs are now saying, okay, I want to come back to work, and because I want to help these patients, they just want to know that the DC, the chiropractor out there, has taken steps to make sure that they can financially keep the practice open. Because there's a lot of benefits of working for a chiropractor. Of course, some just being able to provide that pain management for their patients. They want to know that they can come back and that business is going to continue, because I've talked to some DCs that are really in the balance on whether they're going to make it through. And so they're really, really dependent upon these monies. I was just thinking about an email we received today from a chiropractor who hasn't received his PPP money yet. And, he's got 2 months back rent. He's got, staffing issues. And so, unless you had a huge pile of cash sitting somewhere, that's very, very detrimental and very, very scary and very, very stressful.
Mm-hmm.
So the date June 30th seems to have a lot of significance regarding how much of their PPP is forgivable or not. Is that something you could explain a little more in depth?
Sure. So there's 3 tests when it comes to forgiveness. The first one is 75% of the loan that you received under the PPP program has to be used for payroll. And then, of course, the other 25% can be used, no more than 25% can be used for rent, utilities, or mortgage interest. So that's one test. The second test is what they call FTE, full-time equivalent employee. So that just means that whatever you had initially when you, prior to the crisis, that you have to make sure you hit that head count by June 30th. And so if you don't have them back to work, then you get penalized. That's one penalty that you're open for. The second one is that you have to make sure that you're paying them at least 75% of what they were earning before. So that's the big thing. So what they did is they changed these rules a little bit, gave them a little bit clarity here on the 14th of May, and that is, as long as you have them hired before or by June 30th, then they have what they call a safe harbor. So let's say, for example, you had 5 CAs and yourself that worked prior, or maybe associates, or whatever the case is, and you get down to the second week in June, and for whatever reason you haven't been able to bring them all back, you just have to make sure that you hit that head count prior to June 30th, and then you get that waiver or that safe harbor. Now, one thing I always tell my clients, I said, and SBA has made this clear, it doesn't have to be the same person. Number one. Number two, they don't have to be doing the same job. If you had someone who was maybe a CA who can't come back or doesn't want to come back, you can replace them with someone else. And number two, or you can just bring someone else to do a different job other than a CA. Maybe they're just an office clerical or whatever the case is. It's just making sure you meet that requirement. And that's something when we walk our clients through, we coach them on how to maximize that. And so we expect that June 30th, Luke, quite frankly, it will probably get extended, as Marco Rubio was talking about, along with the 8-week period being pushed out as well. So that we have our fingers crossed, and we're believing for the best there.
I feel like you watch the news on finances pretty closely.
Yeah. Quite a bit, yeah. Sometimes it's a little overwhelming, overloading, but we're very, very tapped into. We're a part of a group of about 350 CPAs and accountants around the country. So we have a private Facebook, and we have a portal that we keep in contact with all the new changes. And right there in the beginning, I like to use this illustration. It's like they were building an airplane in the air while it was flying. I mean, it was just constant changes all the time. And now it's gotten a little bit normal. It's not quite as much, changes here and there, because they really were just kind of winging it as they went. But now they're getting a little bit more definition, and we'll still see a few changes as time goes on. And there may be, there's some talk about another ability for PPP money to be released again. So in other words, let's say, for example, you've used up your Paycheck protection money, and for whatever reason, you need more. They may come out with the proposal is another tranche, if you want to call it, of that, so that you just go right back to the same lender and say, hey, I need another, half a month or another month of payroll or something to that degree. So that's a lot of stuff that's been talked about. And of course, we know that the House has proposed a $3 trillion proposal here a couple of weeks ago. And actually, I think it went to the vote today. and the Senate said they're not going to pass it. And that was, it had everything but the kitchen sink in there. And as I tell clients, I said, the Senate and the House are going to have to come to something. Unfortunately, it's not going to be anything quick because they're going to, bicker back and forth. So it's probably going to be, I would expect somewhere on the first part of June before we see another wave of resources being released from our government. The scary thing is, and I guess it's kind of twofold. Number one is what that's going to do to our tax rates in the future. So tax planning is going to be even more important as time goes on because someone's got to pay this tab. I mean, we're racking it up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I know that we're definitely at a point of contention with keeping doors open. One of the questions I formulated as we were listening was worst case scenario here. Somebody's thinking of not being able to continue on as a chiropractor. Any words of wisdom for them?
Yeah, I hope that's not the case, but it could very well happen, like the one out there in Oregon. I believe, quite frankly, that if that was to happen, of course, if you receive your PPP money and you decide just to shut your doors, of course, there's going to be a payback situation there. But there's certainly some great DCs. I can think of some that we work with that would love to have DCs come on and be a part of their practice. They're an expansion mode. I talked to one chiropractor in Indiana yesterday, and he was asking, listen, I want to take this opportunity to expand our practice because we see that there's some need, and there's some that have gone out of business or who have been really struggling, who are asking for help. So I think that this is an opportunity for the industry itself, the profession, to come together and be able to work at, because there's still a lot of needs out there. There's still a lot of chiropractic needs in our population. My wife refers to this as going to be the Corona baby boom. Because everyone's had to stay home during this time. So, the industry is preparing itself for the future I just had my first grandchild here a few weeks ago, and I have my second one coming in October. None of that had to do with Corona, but the point is that we expect that the need's going to continue to grow. And I think I was sharing with you guys earlier that, my granddaughter actually had her first chiropractic adjustment here since she's been born. So I think that's pretty cool that they're starting at a young age. And so back to your question, I believe there's opportunities for any DC out there to be able to still practice, but maybe not take the responsibility and stress, because some people are just not designed for that. I mean, to have the responsibility, I heard the saying one time, a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck, but chiropractors and small business owners live payroll to payroll. And sometimes it can be really stressful, like this situation here, where you still have the bills, you still have the payroll, but you don't have patients coming in. So that does create some tremendous stress for a lot who just don't want to deal with that.
So there's your next vertical, associate referrals.
Actually, there's some great organizations that do that. There's going to be it's interesting. I'll share this funny story real quick and I'll stop. But I have a DC here. I won't say what state. We had a call here a few weeks ago. We were talking about, her loan and everything. And she said, well, I have an associate who, works here. And she said, we're busy. And she said, and we could be busier, but we've had to lay off, personnel because my associate won't come back because he was scared of the coronavirus. Well, come to find out, he was sitting on the beach somewhere. So I told her, I said, there's a lot of chiropractors looking for jobs out there. So I guess I'd be a caution or beware, that may not be a good reason to not be coming in and treating patients as being out on the beach.
So besides the PPP, are there any financial or tax beneficial programs that chiropractors should be applying for, like right now?
Yeah. So, when I talk about tax credits, the research and development credits, that is a process that we, if a DC is paying more than $30,000 in federal income taxes and they have at least 3 employees, there's a potential there of us finding money for them. So I kind of look at that as the next phase. So we've had the PPP and the EIDL and whatever next acronym comes out. But, what we're doing, we had our team review about 80 applications here recently for R&D analysis. And so what this is money that's owed to them from the IRS that they're not going to get tomorrow or next week. It's going to be later on this year. Matter of fact, we're telling them it has historically been somewhere around 12 weeks, about 4 months to get the money, about 3 to 4 months, beg your pardon. Now we're saying, you should expect probably 6 months, because the IRS, if we call the IRS right now, they're not even answering the phones. They're saying they're off, because of the coronavirus, not off, but, they're not working in the office. So everything's been delayed. So we're expecting, by the end of the year, or maybe the first part of next year, that some of these DCs are going to get these nice rebate checks back from these tax credits that they didn't know they could take advantage of. And this is not, again, we're not here to throw any CPAs or accountants under the bus, but this is a specialty. And most of them, I've talked to many CPAs around the country, that they really don't understand it or know it. And so that's the reason why we see this as another revenue source for them a little bit later on. And I can tell you, whether it's your husband, your wife, whatever the case is, knowing that you get a nice check, and we've seen, like I said, anywhere from $15,000 to $150,000 come back for our chiropractors. And we have a few others that are larger than that, but just kind of the range. But when you get those checks back from Uncle Sam, you become the hero for your wife or your husband, knowing that you got this nice little bonus check, especially after what we've endured for the last couple months.
Absolutely. And I think safeguarding people from, one of the things I've learned is pay yourself first. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people just don't know how to pay themselves second.
That's right.
And what are some mistakes that you've seen chiropractors make as they onboard as clients with you concerning tax liabilities and tax breaks and whatever people say after the word tax?
Yeah. So I would say the number one we see beginning, and matter of fact, I wrote an article for Forbes about this, is about the entity choice. So a lot of DCs, now they're starting to see the light a little bit in different states, but a lot of them are sole proprietors and they're Schedule C. And unfortunately, because of that, they're overpaying on their self-employment tax. And so by, structuring things properly and setting up as or at least electing to be taxed as an S corporation, they may already have their LLC in place, but being taxed as an S corporation, they're able to control more so their self-employment tax, that FICA, that right now would be, so 7.65 on each side of it. And so it becomes 15.3% that you're paying on your money without having an S corporation. So we talk about entity choice as the first place we start. The second thing is reasonable wages. So I have chiropractors around the country, Jim and Luke, that they actually have their S corporation set up, and their CPA said, let's just for illustration's sake. So let's say, for example, their income is $150,000 and they're showing $100,000 as their W-2 wage and $50,000 as their profit or their K-1. Unfortunately, they're really robbing themselves, particularly under the new tax code, for two reasons. Number one, $100,000 is probably pretty high. We actually, every one of our clients, we run them through a reasonable wage analysis. And this is information we get from the IRS and the Department of Labor. And what we'll do is, and this is admissible before the IRS, this report that we provide them, and it shows them what their reasonable wage is for all the different activities they do inside their practice. I would love to say that every DC out there, their whole day is about having hands-on patients, but the reality is that's not the case. A lot of times, they're doing a lot of paperwork. They're taking care of clients, or maybe they're answering the phone occasionally, or taking care of a computer issue, or whatever it may be. Their whole day is not about having hands-on patients. So we walk them through that process to determine how much of that is reasonable wage. So, and that what that does, that saves them two things. Number one, it saves them on that FICA tax, again, that 7.65 and that 15.3, but it also allows them to take advantage of the QBI, which is a qualified business income deduction, which is 20%. So I'll use that same illustration. Let's say that $150,000 example I used. Let's say the reasonable wage was $70,000. So that $30,000 would be moved down to their other $50,000, that's $80,000. So instead of getting, initially they were only getting a $10,000 QBI deduction, now they're getting a $16,000 QBI deduction. That means that you don't have to pay taxes on that. So those are just some different things that we generally see. And then, of course, like you said earlier, it's about paying yourself. A lot of DCs are not necessarily the best about planning for the future. They think their practice is going to be their retirement plan. And it could very well be, but it may very well not be. I have a DC I'm working with right now that wants to sell his practice, and finding a buyer sometimes is not the easiest. And it depends on location and a bunch of other aspects of it. So, those are the type of things that when we talk with our chiropractors, it's not about just addressing today, but planning for the future and making sure that their chiropractic practice is not their only asset that they have to depend upon for retirement.
So as we get to the end of this episode, I think a great thing to go out with is what kind of services do you offer to chiropractors, besides helping them with their PPP? Like, what other tax services do you have, and how can they contact you if they're interested?
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Luke. So I'm going to give you two different websites. So the first one is getcovidaid.com. That's where if you need help on the PPP forgiveness or anything about the SBA program, that's where you would go. And then, of course, chirotaxpro.com is our website specifically about tax planning and tax credits. And so that would be the place you would go. And so those are the best ways to contact us, and you can schedule a complimentary consultation with myself or one of my team members. I'm the managing partner here at the firm. And so, our goal, of course, is to be able to do an analysis for you, let you know if we can help you. Great. If we can't, we'll let you know that as well. But, the one thing we do is we guarantee our results. So if whether it's tax planning or tax credit, we guarantee that if for some reason we don't at least double, your investment, we'll give your money back. And that's our commitment to our clients, is because we really don't want it to be a risk to them. And we have a great history, with our clients. Like I said, we've saved from a tax standpoint anywhere from 25 to 60%, which what that equates out to. We've seen clients save anywhere from $15,000 to a couple $100,000 a year in taxes. So everyone's unique. And so that's the reason why we do the analysis, because, again, it's amazing, quite frankly, guys, how different chiropractors can practice and just their modalities and different processes they do inside their practice. It's kind of a potpourri, if you want to call it that, and it's unique, and quite frankly, it's very interesting to me. I don't get a chance to do it quite often as I like, but from when I do a discovery call with DCs, I love to hear the uniqueness of it. And so I still get occasionally to be able to do that. A lot of times it's my team members, but I'm telling you, it really is interesting to find out how different one DC is from another. So that's the process. So just contact if you want assistance on the PPP program. That's getcovidaid.com. If it's for anything about tax planning or tax credits, then you go to chirotaxpro.com. And the last thing I was going to say here is, our goal is not, and our interest is not for you to replace your CPA. But we do, again, we have 5 CPAs and accountants on our team. For those who, I talked to one yesterday who up in Washington State, who said his CPA is in his 70s and is about ready to retire. So those would be a good opportunity where we could come alongside if you wanted someone who understands and specializes in the chiropractic world, because we're going to be looking for things that maybe a CPA works with a bunch of different businesses may not catch. And so that's really our goal. Now, every time we do an analysis for a DC, we're going to look and see if there's anything that maybe was overlooked. I'll give you a prime example is, and I see this quite often, is they'll go out and find, actually get a decompression table, and their CPA wasn't aware that they should be getting a tax credit for that. And so that's just a small example of some things that we might see on a tax return.
And that's about knowing your target audience.
It really is. Absolutely.
And understanding how to serve your avatar.
That's it. Yep. And that's why we focus and we specialize with chiropractors, because we do understand them. Matter of fact, I've said this many, many times. If I wasn't in my mid 50s and, if I was to redo this again, if I wanted to get into a different profession, I would definitely go chiropractic. And I've visited a couple of universities. Our goal actually is to start to work with the universities and try to educate the DCs before they come out of school on really how to get a good grip on their finances and making sure they make good decisions so that they don't, and of course, addressing the debt and all these other things that come along, but really, avoiding the big pitfalls and traps that are out there. So.
Well, on behalf of Luke and I just want to thank you for being our guest today. It was a real honor to get to know you and what kind of services you offer to the beautiful profession of chiropractic. And it's been enlightening to see the depth of knowledge that you provide and how people can work with you. And like I said, people like to pay themselves first, but you'll help them figure out how to pay themselves second.
That's right. That's right.
Well, thanks for being our guest today, Don, and we look very forward to working with you in the near future.
Thank you, Jim and Luke. I appreciate it very much for the opportunity. Have a great day.
Have a good day.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Chiro Hustle. Don't forget to subscribe and check back next week to continue hustling.